You know, when you sent over this Bernie Sanders video, it was called Welcome to the World of Oligarchy.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at first.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, we hear a lot about billionaires in politics, but does it really amount to oligarchy, you know?
Right.
But then I started digging into it, and Sanders makes a pretty compelling case, especially when he focuses on Elon Musk and this whole government funding showdown.
Yeah, it's really interesting how Sanders uses this specific event.
Yeah.
It was a fight over a continuing resolution to fund the government,
Okay.
to highlight this much bigger issue.
Right.
He's essentially saying, look, this seemingly isolated incident reveals a dangerous trend of concentrated wealth influencing our political system.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit.
Okay.
What exactly is a continuing resolution, and why was there so much drama around it?
So a continuing resolution is basically a temporary funding measure that Congress uses to keep the government running when they haven't agreed on a full budget. So in this case, Senate Democrats and House Republicans had actually negotiated a 3-month continuing resolution.
Okay.
And it was about to pass.
Yeah.
With bipartisan support. Things seemed pretty smooth until Elon Musk got involved.
Right, like a plot twist in a political thriller.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the world's wealthiest person jumps onto Twitter and basically threatens to financially back primary challengers against any Republican who votes for this resolution.
Right.
I mean, talk about using your platform.
That's exactly Sanders' point.
Yeah.
He's arguing that this is a prime example of oligarchy in action.
Okay.
He defined it as a system where a small, powerful elite, in this case, billionaires like Musk, control the government, often working against the interests of the majority.
Yeah.
And remember, Musk has a history of political spending.
Right.
He poured at least $277 million into supporting Trump and a Republican Congress.
Okay.
So this move to potentially influence the continuing resolution vote definitely fits a pattern.
So it's not just about having strong opinions.
Yeah.
It's about having the financial firepower to back them up.
Right.
And potentially sway the outcome of political decisions. That's a pretty scary thought.
It is, especially when you consider the tactics Musk allegedly used.
Oh, wow.
Sanders accuses him of spreading outright disinformation.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Disinformation.
Yeah.
Like fake news and conspiracy theories.
Right.
What kind of things was he saying?
Well, for example, Musk claimed the resolution included a massive 40% pay raise for members of Congress.
Oh, wow.
That would certainly be outrageous, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is the raise was actually 3.9%.
Okay.
The same as other federal employees were getting.
Got it.
So it was a deliberate distortion of the facts designed to stir up public anger and opposition.
That's pretty sneaky.
It is.
But why go to such lengths? I mean, what did Musk have to gain from all of this?
That's where Sanders gets into some really interesting speculation.
Okay.
He suggests that Musk's ultimate goal, along with other wealthy elites, is to secure massive tax breaks for themselves and corporations.
Okay.
Potentially when Trump or his allies are back in power.
So he's playing the long game, using his influence to try and shape the political landscape to benefit his own financial interests down the line.
Right.
But wouldn't a government shutdown,
Yeah.
which seemed like a real possibility during the standoff, hurt everyone, including the wealthy?
That's what's so fascinating here.
Yeah.
Sanders argues that Musk has downplayed the potential consequences of a shutdown,
Okay.
even claiming it wouldn't be a big deal.
But isn't that a bit naive?
Yeah.
Didn't Sanders lay out some pretty serious potential fallout from a shutdown?
He talked about cuts to vital programs like cancer research,
Right.
the possibility of higher drug prices, lack of aid for disaster recovery, unpaid troops.
Oh, wow.
He even raised concerns about potential food insecurity for families who rely on WIC.
Wow. So it's not just an abstract political debate.
No.
It's about real people's lives and well-being.
Yeah.
This is starting to feel like a very high-stakes game of chess, and everyday Americans are the pawns.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it raises the question, how do we protect ourselves from this kind of influence?
Yeah.
How do we ensure that the needs of the many aren't sacrificed for the desires of the few?
Well, before we dive into potential solutions, I'm curious about the other examples of disinformation Sanders mentions.
Okay.
What else was Musk allegedly spreading?
Sure. Well, Sanders also points out that Musk claimed the continuing resolution funded bioweapons labs.
Oh, really?
Which, as you can imagine, sparked a lot of fear and outrage.
Yeah.
But according to Sanders, that's simply not true.
Okay.
The resolution actually funded programs to protect against infectious diseases.
Okay.
So it's another example of how a seemingly small distortion of the truth
Right.
can have a huge impact on public perception.
It's almost like a case study in how to manipulate public opinion,
Right.
play on people's fears,
Yeah.
twist the facts just enough to make them believable, and then amplify those claims through social media.
Exactly.
It's a recipe for chaos.
It is, and it gets to the heart of why Sanders is so concerned about this trend toward oligarchy.
Okay.
He sees it as a direct threat to democracy itself.
Right.
When a handful of ultra-wealthy individuals can use their money and influence to spread disinformation and potentially derail important legislation, it undermines the very foundation of a system where everyone's voice is supposed to be heard.
It's almost like they're operating by a different set of rules.
Right.
Playing a game that most of us don't even realize exists.
Yeah.
And if they can influence the outcome of something as fundamental as government funding, what else can they control?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
And it leads to another point Sanders makes.
Okay.
The influence of the wealthy extends far beyond just political maneuvering.
Okay.
He expresses concern about the concentration of ownership in the economy and the media.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Sure.
How does the control of the economy and media tie into this idea of oligarchy?
Well, Sanders argues that when a small group of people owns a disproportionate amount of wealth and controls key industries and media outlets,
Right.
it creates a feedback loop that reinforces their power.
Okay.
They can use their wealth to influence policy,
Right.
then use their media outlets to shape public perception and control the narrative around those policies.
Got it.
It's like a self-perpetuating system that benefits the few at the expense of the many.
So it's not just about having money.
No.
It's about having the power to shape the way people think.
Right.
And the information they have access to.
Uh-huh.
That's a whole other level of influence.
Exactly. And it becomes even more alarming when you consider the role of disinformation.
Oh, wow.
If people are being fed distorted or outright false information through channels they trust,
Right.
it becomes much harder to make informed decisions about anything, let alone political issues.
It's like trying to navigate a maze in the dark. You don't know which way to turn.
Right.
And every path seems to lead you further astray.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of why Sanders sees this as such an urgent issue.
Okay.
He believes that if we don't actively resist this trend toward oligarchy, we risk losing our democracy altogether.
Wow.
He calls for a mass mobilization of ordinary citizens, urging people to educate themselves about these issues, organize and push back against the growing influence of the billionaire class.
But what does that look like in practice? I mean, how do we as individuals go up against such a powerful force? It feels almost like David versus Goliath.
Well, Sanders doesn't offer any easy solutions.
Right. Okay.
But he does emphasize the importance of awareness and engagement. He believes that informed citizens working together can make a difference.
So it's not just about complaining about the problem.
No.
It's about taking concrete steps to address it.
Exactly.
What are some things we can do to become more informed and engaged citizens?
First and foremost, we need to be critical consumers of information.
Okay.
We can't just passively accept everything we see and hear, especially online.
Right.
We need to develop media literacy skills, learn how to evaluate sources, identify bias, and seek out diverse perspectives.
So it's about becoming more discerning, asking questions, and doing our own research.
Right.
But what about beyond the individual level?
Yeah.
Are there larger systemic changes that could help address this issue?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing Sanders advocates for is campaign finance reform.
Okay.
He believes that the undue influence of money in politics is a major driver of this trend toward oligarchy.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If we can limit the amount of money that individuals and corporations can pour into political campaigns, it might level the playing field a bit and give more power back to the people.
Exactly. And there are other potential solutions as well.
Yeah, like strengthening antitrust laws to prevent monopolies promoting media literacy education in schools, and even exploring new models of democratic participation that give citizens more direct control over decision-making.
Okay, so there are things that can be done,
Yeah.
both on an individual and a societal level.
Right.
But let's go back to Sanders' central argument for a moment.
Okay.
You know, I've been thinking,
Yeah.
is it fair to say that all billionaires are a threat to democracy?
That's an interesting point.
I mean, Doesn't every citizen, regardless of their wealth, have a right to engage in politics?
That's a really thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of the dilemma.
Okay.
How do we balance the rights of individuals to participate in politics
Mm-hmm.
with the potential for undue influence by a powerful few?
Right.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It is, and I think it's important to acknowledge
Yeah.
that there are billionaires who use their wealth for good,
Right.
supporting philanthropic causes
Right.
and advocating for positive social change.
Yeah. But the potential for abuse is undeniable.
I agree, and that's why it's so crucial to have this conversation,
Yeah.
to raise awareness about the potential dangers of concentrated wealth, and to explore ways to safeguard our democracy against those who would seek to exploit it for personal gain.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to recognize that this issue of billionaire influence is not just a theoretical concern.
Mm-hmm.
It's playing out in real time right now,
Yeah.
and it has tangible consequences for all of us.
Right.
It's about understanding how power operates in our society, how information is shaped and manipulated, and how we can protect ourselves from those who would seek to undermine our democratic institutions.
It feels like this whole conversation boils down to one question, really.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that our democracy represents the people and not just, those with the deepest pockets?
That's the core of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a challenge that democracies around the world are grappling with.
Right.
I mean, when you have this extreme concentration of wealth,
Yeah.
it's almost inevitable that it spills over into the political arena.
It's like this invisible hand tilting the scales, shaping the rules of the game to favor a select few.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned earlier, the control of media outlets,
Yeah,
that just amplifies that influence even further.
exactly. It's what Sanders refers to as that feedback loop.
Right.
The wealthy can influence policy
Yeah.
and then use their media platforms to control the narrative around those policies,
Right.
often framing them in a way that benefits their interests.
Right.
It's a subtle form of manipulation that can be very difficult to counter.
So it's not just about being aware of the problem. It's
Oh.
about being able to see through the smoke and mirrors,
Right.
to recognize when we're being manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires a whole new level of media literacy.
I couldn't agree more. We need to be able to critically evaluate the information we're consuming,
Yeah.
identify bias, and seek out diverse perspectives.
Right.
It's about becoming savvy consumers of information, not just passive recipients.
So what are some practical steps we can take to develop those media literacy skills?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information out there.
Right.
Like, where do we even begin?
Well, one thing we can do is be more mindful of our sources.
Okay.
So who is funding the website or the news outlet we're reading?
Right.
What are their potential biases?
Yeah.
Are they presenting a balanced perspective, or are they pushing a particular agenda?
It's like becoming a detective, following the trail of information back to its source and examining the motives behind it.
Exactly.
And I guess that also applies to social media, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We need to be aware of how algorithms and echo chambers can shape the information we're exposed to.
Yeah, social media can be a great tool
Yeah.
for connecting with others and sharing ideas.
Right.
But it's also a breeding ground for disinformation and manipulation.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of how those platforms work,
Mm-hmm.
how they filter the information we see,
Right.
and how they can be used to exploit our biases and emotions.
So it's about being more conscious of how we're interacting with these platforms.
Yes.
Not just scrolling mindlessly, but engaging critically with the content we're consuming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And beyond individual actions,
Yeah.
we need to be thinking about systemic solutions as well.
Right.
Things like campaign finance reform,
Mm-hmm.
promoting media literacy education in schools,
Right.
and even exploring new models of democratic participation
Okay.
that give citizens more direct control over decision-making.
It sounds like addressing this issue requires a multi-pronged approach.
I think so.
We need individual awareness and action,
Yeah.
but we also need larger structural changes
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that our democracy is truly resilient against the undue influence of wealth and power.
I think that's a great way to sum it up.
Yeah.
It's a complex issue,
Yeah, it is.
but it's one that we can't afford to ignore.
Right.
The future of our democracy may very well depend on our ability to recognize and resist the subtle and not so subtle ways
Mm-hmm.
in which concentrated wealth can undermine the will of the people.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
It's made me think more critically about the information I consume,
Good.
the way power operates in our society, and the importance of active citizenship.
I'm glad to hear that, and I hope our listener feels similarly empowered
Yeah.
to engage with these issues and to be a part of the solution.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.